PhD students who are watching this, you have to realize you are a stakeholder. You are generating this document. You have a say if some rules are going to be changed.
I'm happy to welcome Dr. Vera Chan to my podcast today. She's a host of PhDCoffeeTime, a YouTube channel offering motivation, peer support, and practical tips during your PhD. I gotta write me one of those intros soon. This is too good. She's a great science communicator, and her channel has grown tremendously over the last year, in many ways due to her dedication, process-driven attitude, and a wealth of knowledge and experience as a PhD student and postdoc. We discuss her best videos, approach to making them, and what a scientist of the future will look like. Welcome to Biofilm Podcast. Thank you very much for joining me today. I'm very excited to have you on my podcast for many reasons. You know, you're a fellow YouTuber as well. Your channel is called PhDCoffeeTime. By the way, I love this title. I do love coffee, and I have to say that you've been scaling up quite well over the last year. And congratulations to all of your recent growth.
Thank you very much. And I did prepare my coffee mug. Although it's evening, I'm drinking water, but we can have a coffee conversation.
Cheers to that. This is my original logo as well. It's courtesy of my best friend from Russia.
Oh, I love that.
Cheers. So my first question to you, and it's a spin on my regular segment where I ask my guests about their movie or TV recommendations. Since I like to start calling this video a Covideo recommendation, I'd like you to plug the best video that you have on your YouTube channel right now and that you're the most proud of.
I would say, the one that I got the most view is the postdoc one. But I feel like PhD, like your YouTube channel, when you're creating video, you always feel like an indie artist. Sometimes the videos that you're the most proud of don't get views as much. So if I choose one, I wouldn't choose the one with the most view. I actually feel the most proud of the lab notebook taking tips, because I wish someone had taught me from day one how to write my lab notebook. And I genuinely hope, since even now I'm no longer officially academia person, I love the video to help as many PhD out there to just have more organization and feel more confident about keeping a lab notebook. And maybe that will help science in a way. Mm-hmm. So I'm the most proud of that one.
Yeah, definitely. I can relate to that, because again, I also wasn't taught what's the best way to do the lab taking notes. It's dependent on lab to lab. It depends on the person as well. And if there are no requirements, it can be a really challenging thing. I think you've done a video on how to do it in OneNote. So that's something I personally used, and that was like really, really great tool for me. But if you were to maybe pick between like OneNote and Evernote, or just sticking with handwritten notes, like where would you see yourself doing it if you had to redo it all over your PhD again? Not that you should.
Yeah, that's a good question. I have to be fair to Evernote. I have never tried them because I only have started with OneNote and it works fine. And I'm a big believer, if something is not broken, let's not fix it. So I am simplistic in that way. That's why I chose OneNote. And I do think that organization is very self-explanatory. Like you have a notebook, you have folders, you have pages, subpages, and it's easy to just intuitively understand the organization. Mm-hmm. I love the screen clipping features of OneNote. So nowadays, most of the time, I don't even write handwritten notes because my handwriting is terrible, and I can tell. You can see my French notebook that like all my handwriting is just not very good. So sometimes when you can get lost in organizing logically. Yeah. But if you have OneNote, if it's typed notes, you can organize it later on, so you can have another level of engagement to the notes that you have made instead of just linear page by page. So I prefer digital notes a lot more than handwritten notes, with the disclaimer that I do know handwriting helps your brain to engage to the content. So I still encourage students to start writing. If it is a really tough topic, subject matters is tough, it's better to draw it out and write down the notes. So I would say they both is a cheat to say I don't have preference, but I think they serve different purposes, and I think it depends on what you're trying to get out of
Did you had a chance to use OneNote, like draw anything in OneNote with a stylus? Because I think that would maybe bridge the gap between the two worlds, I suppose.
So OneNote 2020 did have an update on how they create, like in the past, OneNote inking is the word, like is the feature of inking is bad. So I prefer to use GoodNote, which was another app that I use, and I use the stylus on like a note, my iPad. But OneNote, the complaint I have is it doesn't straighten your line automatically when you have like a triangle, like and it doesn't make a triangle. But now they have fixed it, and now OneNote can do that. But the problem is also stylus on computer. I don't have one, so I will have to imagine clicking on the mouse, or it's not very ergonomic with like using OneNote itself. But I guess I could use my stylus on my iPad, but for some reason I have been so used to the GoodNote on my iPad that I just haven't been using enough inking. Yeah, that's a good point.
I was always concerned about in the laboratory, just academic laboratory, you tend to just take your notes and organize them in whichever way you want, versus in the industry, typically like in a GMP environment or something like that, or even an R&D environment, I would imagine it's very different process of note taking. Everything has to be tabulated, signed off, and stuff like that. So I feel like there's a huge gap between note-taking skills that you acquire in your PhD versus anything that you would ever need to do in the industry. Like, what's the best way to maybe train the students on how to do that correctly and prepare them for what's to come in the industry?
Well, that's the question I was planning to ask you, Pavel, because you are in more of the tech side of industry. I'm now a writer. I no longer get in the lab. So technically, I don't think I qualify well for this question to be answered. That's a disclaimer. But I do know there are free applications that are like electronic lab notebook that can be used. Like when I was making my lab notebook video, thanks that we started with that video idea. So when I was preparing that, I came across different free lab notebook platforms, and it looks like there are more and more tools that are available for PhD students to use. But again, the lab notebook is down to the PI. You know, you can't create your own way of note taking without the permission of your PI. So this is kind of like driven by how the lab leader wants the lab notebook to be kept. And I was just say like notes taking on OneNote could be more personal to me. I think it's like my way of remembering which paper to read, my way of remembering what reagent I'm going to make as a to-do item, to-do list. But for a scientific notebook, it has to be in agreement with your lab mate, your team, what is expected, and be clear about what is expected from you. So I can imagine the electronic notebook, it will be authenticated by the PI, and the user would create like a page per date, and everything has to be logged after a certain time, I would think. And then the other authenticator would be signing off when they approve whatever is documented. You can correct me if I understood it properly.
No, I think there's basically an elements of that are already integrated in many of those either free or paid LIMS services, or just the electronic lab notebooks. And this is one of those features that I really, really like. But I feel like if I ever had to do that in a PhD environment, I would not be very happy, because it's like it requires so much more effort on a student's part to learn that, to implement that, to stick to that. But it is, in some ways, it is very important skill to have, because if you're not prepared, if you've never done something like this, it could be so overwhelming if you have to start a career in an R&D setting in an industry. So, I mean, that's maybe something to explore. I mean, I always had struggled with that thought, like, how would I ever do that? Fortunately, I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to have like really any meaningful like lab notes other than just for my own personal work.
Right.
But that's as far as like 21st century, there's many advances now with these types of technologies and how deeply they integrate with all other aspects of laboratory management. So
going back to the videos, you mentioned you have a postdoc video that obviously was one of the biggest by the number of views. But I'm curious to what was the inspiration for you to start a YouTube channel, and as maybe a little bit even a step back, what was the scientific background that you had that sort of made you feel like, okay, now I want to share what I've learned with others?
Well, thank you so much for asking that question. Since as a YouTuber, you're not allowed to explain yourself, otherwise people would click away from your video. So I'm waiting for my moment. Someone asked me. So thank you for asking me that question. So it's called PhD Coffee Time. There were two elements that come in play. Is the coffee time, the break, because I do want more PhD to start seeking a balance in the day, because most of us starting a PhD studies and postdoc research, we are just so, I think, overly intensive working has been glamorized, and the break in between is not really well celebrated. So I felt like coffee time is a concept that I hope that I can help encourage more people to take. And then for me, I'm from Hong Kong. Hong Kong is a city that we are so hardworking, is famous for its long working hour. Like I think on average, people in Hong Kong work 55 hours per week, and we don't have overtime payment. And that's an average number. So I felt like sometimes even as a Hong Konger, I don't feel very open to taking a break. And I wish if I have a break, I can learn something productively. So that was the idea of insanely trying to fit like a practical tips idea into coffee breaks. And when people can catch a break, they can feel productive about that day and also catch a break, like watch a video, they sit there and not think about research for 15 minutes.
Wow. I just realized my biggest miscalculation. I didn't figure out when the students will actually want to watch the videos, because I think we have similar audiences, but I think you went a step further and like, okay, you want to go after them when they have their free time. So which is great. I think that's very smart play. But let's say, what was the inspiration for you? Because I mean, we all have the experiences as PhD students, like our fair share of struggles, successes and stuff. But how did you feel about first starting to share what you have learned with others? Like, what was the spark that sort of ignited the passion, if you will?
Sure, definitely. The coffee was just the structure, right? And the content itself, it comes from Clemson when I was in university, postdoc, when in my last university in US. There was a good graduate school program that they teaches professional development workshop. And I was a big fan of it, and I go every week. And every week we learn like project management, setting SMART goals, and everything like peer support group. If you are international, like you may need to like actively think about different aspects of your research in a different light. And I kind of call them like a yoga session of your research. Like until you go to a yoga studio, you don't feel like you have all this muscle like not stretching well, until the yoga teacher put you in those position, and you realize, oh gosh, I really needed this stretch. And I felt like those workshops were professional development, because like PhD, like you said, we don't spend enough time thinking about how we do the work. We don't have enough space and time to process every little details, like how to keep a spreadsheet, how to research properly. We have all these deadlines that we try to graduate on time, and there's endless list of literature reading and writing. So it almost feels like learning how to manage a project, learning Gantt chart, setting SMART goal, or even simply keeping an Excel sheet or using PowerPoint and Word properly. Those are the skills that you only learn how much time it saves you by the moment you realize what you have done wrong, and most of the time, when I was building a figure, for example, back in Clemson, I used PowerPoint to make a figure, and it's really not designed to do the work. And the moment someone taught me Adobe Illustrator, and now I use Inkscape because I no longer have the license. Adobe is welcome to sponsor me, by the way, if I have no more license. But Illustrator is great. And what happened was, when the moment I transitioned between the software, I saved maybe a week of time, because I used PowerPoint and I created little object and tried to create a little flask, little test tube. By the time you create like 200 objects on PowerPoint, it slows and freezes. I don't know if you have tried that, but PowerPoint is not made for that. And the moment I've learned to change that like effort into the right software and use it in the right way, I can create a poster for a conference in 1 hour. And,
to be honest, I did make a poster in a PowerPoint just because in some way it was easier, but I do completely understand the hassle that it is to try and make even the simplest of figures in PowerPoint.
Right.
And from scratch, and that's the asset manipulation in Adobe Illustrator is definitely. I fortunately learned earlier on because I've seen that in order for me to access all the previous figures for our laboratory, it was all in Illustrator projects. So I was like, well, I have to use it now. So it's interesting you say like it took you like so much time to get to the point of getting to use Illustrator through all the hassle of learning with PowerPoint. And it's really important to share it with people because I do believe in this sort of core concept of knowledge is power, and knowledge is so vital because it really accelerates so much of our lives. But now that you say that, so what was the first let's say the moment where you're like, okay, now I want to do a YouTube video? What I mean, because I feel for every YouTuber, there is a defining moment where it's like, I can no longer sit by, I have to put a camera and start doing that.
Yeah, well, so the context is I have been away from my family and friends from Hong Kong since 6 years ago. So ever since I come to the United States, I have already started thinking about starting something on YouTube. But it took a long time to realize what I wanted to say. And because in US, everyone spoke in English and I have many friends. So a lot of time I don't get the time and space to do the work that I felt like is important to do. But until in France, because everyone spoke in French, and at work, I don't get ironically, not all the coffee breaks, they were speaking in English, and my French were just too little to understand everyone. And it's not a personal attack. I think people who are native French speakers, they feel more relaxed when they speak in French. But in the same time, I miss the connection with people. And when I started PhD Coffee Time, it was 2020. I started already maybe 1.5 year as postdoc, 1 year almost as postdoc. And my contract is supposed to finish in a few months. And at the time, I felt like, first of all, I'm a New Year resolution person. I like making new goal every year. And last year, 2020, my goal was to make one video a week and be consistent about it and post once a week without overthinking. And that was my goal to myself. And I'm not trying to prove to even like my audience anything. Like that was just a stubborn goal I have. When people ask me to have dinner, I say, no, I'm not joining because I need to make this video.
Wow.
So that's, yeah.
How many friends did you lose as a result of that?
Yeah, but with the pandemic now, I think I only have 2 cats left in my home. So, but I'm joking. But yeah, I've actually gained a lot of friends because of YouTube. Like meet people like you, people reaching out on LinkedIn, and also personally, I become more searchable on the internet. I think it's also helping me to find recruitment, like recruiters find you easier on LinkedIn, and you get maybe higher chance and advantage over application.
I assume you are about to take this a lot more seriously than you maybe have in the beginning. Like, did you see yourself having this kind of amazing growth over the last year? And the reason I'm asking this, I know you took also like an MSL class with Martijn Biker, who I'm actually also interviewed previously.
Yeah.
And so where did the switch maybe happen to you, or have not yet happened, that you're like, okay, now I want to maybe take this YouTube a lot more seriously and become a YouTuber versus just having like just a regular like a writer job or some other job in the industry?
Well, first of all, I don't know if I can call myself very serious on for this channel. So I believe in one thing is I can't control the metrics. And I don't have control who give a like, who give a thumb down, or whether or not people click open the video to watch it, or whether people are offended by something and they unsubscribe, or they share with a friend or not. So these are I am clear since PhD. I think I have gained the mental resilience to not care about outcome in terms of metrics. I can't guarantee how much my paper are cited. I can't guarantee if my CV is going to be read by the recruiter. But I learned that I would never take things personally. Like if even my channel to this day only have less than 1,000 subscribers, I would still be making video. It wouldn't bother how I do my work. But I do feel very thankful and honored that there are audience that come to the channel and want to watch the content. So I don't know if that answered the question. I'm not prepared to be like a full-time YouTuber making a living. It's not that much money. If I can share more with you offline, but yeah, it's but I do care. What I do care is about how my time and energy has been scaled up. So say, for example, I am now a YouTuber because of technically I am monetizing. I have more than 4,000 views a year. I have more than 1,000 subscribers. And that's the benchmark for being a YouTuber, right? And what I care more is so every video, 15 minutes, it takes me about 7 hours to edit, 7 to 8. Some of them, if they're longer, it can be 10 hours. And now up to this day, I have 55 videos as the time we are speaking. And I have gained about 5,000 something hour of views. So what that tells me is my effort of spending about 8 to 10 hours per video is scaling 10 times more effect. I would have used that hour to talk to every one of you guys in person, talking about Gantt chart, talking about how to make a lab notebook until I run out of energy. I need to do this 10 times more to make the same impact. And I think what I care the more is how this energy is scaling and how this is impacting in a positive manner, how this is bringing someone's day, making that day a little better. Because I've been there as PhD. Sometimes if you have a problem, you want to Google and find an answer. So my dream is that I can provide some kind of answer to that Google search. Maybe they found a video because they searched something about image J and they found my video and they found, oh my gosh, she answered every question. And guess what? I'm also answering the emails and comments. So that I think that feeling of support is something I wish I had. So that was the motivation. So I did have a goal that I wish I gained 1,000 subscribers by the end of last year. Which has been reached by October. So I don't really have a big metrics on how big I can grow, because by default PhD is a small community. It's not very realistic to think about the YouTube channel in the same way as other YouTube channel that has cooking video, cat video. You can gain a lot more views with that. But I do believe that I deliberately want to be keeping a niche topic because, first of all, I don't want to get world famous. I do like privacy. I do like to I do like to not get recognized by people. That's the feeling I have. I don't know if this is a strange answer to your question.
No, that's an absolutely fair answer, and it sounds like it's a very humble purpose of support and just sort of giving back to the community, giving back to the next generation of people who are indeed struggling. And especially last year, since I finished my PhD in February last year, I felt very fortunate that I didn't have some of those same struggles that other students in my cohort were facing, for example, all that uncertainty. There were other issues with finishing right before everything happened, like not being able to have any clue whether or not there will be any jobs. That's another thing. But I feel like having had support from throughout the years of being able to rely on other people for advice or from some kind of experience is very important. So I think what you're doing is actually really helping, and that's reflected in the metrics that you're mentioning. It's quite amazing. So I do want to ask you though, the topics that you take for your videos, are they mostly from your own mistakes or some kind of experience, or you also now starting to tap into the experiences that you might have heard of but you had not had direct, let's say, experience with?
So far, the last year of video, they were all my own mistake because there was countless of them. And if I have to pace myself one video a week and I can only have 52 mistakes, and I have 6 years of postdoc plus 4 years of PhD, so I'm still counting my own mistakes. So I haven't quite got there yet to listen to my audience and try to gain insight. But for sure, I know what the point was. The topic sometimes, to step back one time, is there are videos that I refer to questions that were mailed to me. They ask about like how would I address those questions. Like one was from a friend of mine who has 2 PhD offers and wanted to know which one should choose. I had a 3-hour phone call with that person and I explained how I would have chosen it. Then I made that video 15 minutes long and I put it on my channel. And I wouldn't say that was my own because I only have 1 offer, but actually, no, I did have 2 offers. Sorry. Yeah. But then I told him at the time, how would I choose? Like you would search what is the topic that you like to work on and kind of have a matrix of Web of Science and try to know if that professor is relevant to what you do, have a sense of the culture of the lab. So those are the borrowed ideas, but mostly I would say they are my own. I have a 30 list, 30 videos idea starting even January. So I have all these thoughts that I have come across and I wanted to document them. And sometimes they are very too small of an audience to gain views. Like I have a mentorship videos about how you could mentor students as a PhD. Because we all have imposter syndrome, and it took me a long time to realize how I can become a better mentor and how to motivate students. But that one doesn't get viewed a lot because most PhD are too busy doing their own work.
I understand that it's very difficult to also condense the experience that you have into a video, because I do get also asked about my transition to the industry position. And just in general experience on LinkedIn or with resumes. And I do have occasional conversations with some of my peers or some of the younger students where I would, also have like a Zoom session with them or something where I would discuss that with them. But and I also had exercised the idea of making the same kinds of videos that you're making. But in some ways, I felt it's very difficult to condense all of that information to, let's say, like a 10-minute video describing all of those bullet points. Like, can you lift the curtain a little bit and sort of describe your thought process of not just selecting the topic, but also how do you break down the structure of your video to make the most impact and to make it the most sort of dense when it comes to advice?
Right. That's a great question because I do by learning, because sometimes when I record myself and I put on makeup and dress out and comb my hair, and then after you record it 2 weeks later, you're editing the video and you forgot that you have a point that you have not spoken about. So what do? And the video is not complete. So one trick I would give is you are allowed to make a video out of PowerPoint slides and make it like a movie. So that's what I've been doing for a lot of videos. It's not that I'm good at animation. It's just I forgot to talk about it when I was recording myself. And I just wanted to complete the idea later on. So you are allowed, because when video is just, the concept of a video is just having some kind of visuals and some kind of audio. You can even have a slideshow and you talk about a photo, and that's also a video. So you're not constrained to the mindset of showing up and speaking directly to the camera and, all that conventional video making. And yeah, so that's my tip. And always having bullet points. When I talk about a topic, I don't have script. So I always have bullet points on OneNote. And I would just look at each point and I will record myself for 1 to 2 minutes for each bullet point. And then I put them back together and I edit out all the and ha and like all this hesitation. That become each video. So I can't do the video speaking level that I was doing in the video in real person, which I hope this is not a disappointment to my viewer, but
I understand. I completely understand the process of trying to record something from the bullet points, having done at least a few of them in the draft form. I realized I'm so bad at this, even with bullet points, that I would need to have a teleprompter. So like I've had to save extra money to put in and invest in a teleprompter. So if I ever do some kind of videos where I just directly talk to camera, it's just as simple as using a teleprompter, because it does achieve the same purpose. But I feel like going back and forth of like recording everything and then having to go back and trim all the fat, if you will, is such a tedious work. So I applaud you for your dedication to the craft. It does take an effort, and I think a lot of people may or may not realize that behind, as you just said, behind a 10-minute video, there's a 7-hour work that is involved in that,
right.
potentially more, and years of actual experience that then gets distilled down into this nice little package that other people get to enjoy and just take it in and really use in their life.
Well, thank you. I hope they find it as an enjoyment, but not a torture, because like sometimes I'm bored of my own speaking when I was editing my videos, but I do know those are important points. So there was actually a viewer that told me she was binge watching my video, and I said to her, I'm so sorry. Like, I don't know what I have done to you. Yeah. Please go and, watch some catch video and balance your mind out. I think
that's a very long coffee break.
I know. And I think the best way to take my videos idea is to just take one day at a time. And because I think most of the work is not watching the video, is to have your self-reflection and to put a new goal and new action item for the rest of the week. So that's why I don't put more than one video a week, because I do want people who actually watch the video, if they are in PhD time, like work studies, I do want them to just take a step back and what I have learned, write it down, and try to execute how they can improve their PhD by doing something instead of just sitting passively and watch. So yeah.
Are you planning on writing a book out of all of that? Because I feel like that's the next logical step. Like at some point, the amount of videos and tips you will reach a certain critical point where it's like, okay, now I have enough material for like a book or a guide. Because I mean, you're also a writer as well.
I am a writer. That's why I think I'm not paid enough to do more work. My day, I can share more about my day. Is as a writer, I do a lot of typing during the day. So at my lunchtime, I sit on the side and I just edit videos for my break. So that's my mental segregation from work and life. And editing video is something I feel less stressful. Writing, it requires more attention to details. And yeah, so I felt like also, but I think it's maybe better for people, for audience who prefer to read. So that could be in the future equation, but for now, I really don't have a plan on that. I did have an idea before that I can make a board game,
wow, that's interesting.
Like every what matter is not what I talk about in those videos. What matter is those topics of videos are important. Like whatever they agree about logbook writing, whatever they agree on Gantt chart and time management, however I do it, Vera do it. It's not the golden equation. There is no one way of doing the best PhD. But what I wanted to do is maybe the group of team members will watch the video and they will discuss those topics as per what they think is the best. Because when I was postdoc, everyone's smarter than Vera. Everyone. Technically, nobody is less smart as me. So of course. Right. So I felt like maybe that could be a board game that people roll a dice and they watch one of the random video and then they have to talk about it and then summarize how they would improve that week. I think that would be my dream.
It's interesting you mentioned the idea of a community sort of watching of the videos, or at least at the very least listening to the topics and discussing it amongst themselves. It just popped into my mind. Are you aware of this platform called Clubhouse by any chance?
Yeah, I heard of it, but I still haven't.
I mean, I can send you an invite. Frankly, I haven't really been on it too much, but one of the interesting things about it is this sort of experience of it's like a panel discussion where you have multiple users discussing certain topics, and you have an audience. And it struck me as some type of alternative to what a YouTube video can offer, which is a way to not just have a monologue of a person giving their own opinion, but have more of a discussion with a broader audience. And it seems to me like, what are your thoughts on that? Like, is this something that you would maybe want to do instead of, like, as you said, you have your own perspective on things, but you would much rather have it as a dialogue?
Yeah, I certainly prefer not only one way of dissemination, but have exchanges. But as a social media person, so far I don't know if I should identify myself as one, but I use social media enough to care about outcome. Like, what is the engagement score, for example? Like, if I have one YouTube video and I can reach 1,000 people in a month, for example, and Clubhouse, I'm not sure how many people will be engaged. And we all know we are all social media, how to say, what is that word? We're kind of fatigued from social media in some way. So I am a grandma. So are you asking the wrong person?
I see.
I think another practicality is my phone doesn't have data. So I can only come home and use my Wi-Fi, and with my tired body and try to come up with things to write on social media to just engage the videos so far that I have. But like with Clubhouse, I would imagine is like it would be more level of commitment of time and energy. Yeah. So I care about how much effect that is bringing, because for sure, if there are more people there, then yes, I will be there. But like sometimes I felt like even an Instagram post doesn't get, like, I don't know, more than 100 likes, and there is a conversion rate into how much impact you are putting energy out and how much return you are getting. And I'm not a CEO, but like I think we all have to think about return on the investment. Sometimes you invest and time is limited. So that's a boring answer to the interesting question again. I'm sorry.
I think it's fascinating because I start to sense the recurring theme with you, which is you're really leveraging a sort of scientific mentality when you talk about YouTube. And that's actually was one of the questions that I wanted to ask you point blank, but you already kind of answered it, which is, what's the sort of the skill that you have that you take from your scientific background and you use in your YouTube career? And it seems to me that you're taking these sort of numbers, which they're very relevant, but maybe tend to get overlooked. At least I would say I'm a little bit guilty of overlooking some of that, because obviously I don't have nearly as many numbers to look at and draw any kind of conclusion. But your point on return of investment, time spent, how many users tend to watch the videos, and so on and so forth, actually tells me that you are very serious about and very mindful, I would say, about these types of metrics, and you're spending your time a lot wisely than perhaps maybe I do at this point. So I'm actually learning quite a lot from you at this very moment.
I'd love to share more offline as well if you want. But I like to say one thing is, if you see any of the earlier time management video, I do believe because of PhD, you have to be very efficient in whatever you choose to do. You have to choose the right time to do the right work. Like I'm religiously spending only the morning writing, and I don't, if there's a student trying to make an appointment, I will at least have him at like 10 a.m. So I have 2 hours in the morning to write. And I think the same way is when I do anything, I would immediately start questioning, am I the best person to do that work? And am I going to be efficient and good at it? And yeah, and also maybe the background is I am anemic, so I have not as much energy as other people. Like I get tired easily. So I have to learn and strategize how I spend energy on, and try not to get overwhelmed and distracted as well. So, I mean, I'm not saying no to Clubhouse. I will check it out and get excited about it. But like, I'm not sure. Like, I started a Facebook group, and I don't know whoever signed up for PhD Coffee Time private group. I feel sorry because I know I don't have enough energy to manage all of this platform. So there are less than 100 people in the group, and I wish that they would talk to each other organically. So if you're watching and you are in that group, please talk to each other. And I'm not getting I'm not trying to sell them something. I'm not using the platform to do anything for my own good. So I think that it is very difficult to just spend all the energy to manage every single platform. And I've learned that.
I completely agree with that. It's really this last year it really showed all of us, not just scientists, but all the people, that social media takes up so much of our time, and the amount of content that is available for consumption is higher than ever before, and it just keeps growing. So, what do you think is the best way to manage all of that content? From like, how do you manage the content that you receive, but also as a creator of content yourself, does that sort of inform your decision-making process of like when to make the video, what topics to select for, and like how do you break through the noise in that regard?
Yeah, I do read Twitters. Like I do follow tweets a lot because they are the most efficient way to gain the most information in a short time. And I would say a lot of time people can also DM, they message to me, and so one thing is I'm not extroverted. I don't know if you now can sense, although I talk a lot, but I gain energy by being by myself and alone. So to gain my sanity, I have to unplug. Like a lot of time I have to unplug. So I schedule time, maybe by the end of the day, I go to like social media for like half an hour, and that will be it for me. And sometimes it's not a good idea, because when someone's having a follow Friday and they tag me, and then I only discover 23 hours later the next day when I go in, that's a pros and cons. But I've chosen the way to live the life of not getting distracted by social media, because I know how time can be disappearing, and I am also doing not like my way of disseminating content is YouTube, which is the most time demanding one. Like it's not like writing a blog may be slightly easier. Like if it is less words, like comparatively, you probably don't need 7 hours to write 500 words, right? So I think my investment is huge. So so I have been strategizing dedicated time. And if someone don't tag me, most likely I don't see it. So that's the way. If you want to post anything about me, tag me on the social media. I will reply, and I will see asynchronously, but not immediately. But that's my strategy, is to not worry about being replying right away. So
okay. I'm also interested in sort of this blue sky mindset when it comes to the technology overall, and how it pertains to science in general. So we just talked about the social media aspect of it, but there's an onslaught of so many different technologies that permeate scientific experiences overall, and it will undoubtedly change the way that science is done. And the image of a scientist in a 5 to 10 year time will look completely different from when you or myself have done PhD. And just sort of in the sort of conclusion of maybe our podcast, I was interested in maybe your take on the tips that you're sharing and the image of a scientist that you want to see in the next 5 to 10 years. Like what is an ideal scientist look like to you? How do they use the technology that is available to them?
This is a good one. I think right now scientists is hired by the public, right? So our funding and our positions, the resources that we have as scientists, like however much we feel we are disconnected from the rest of the world and we have a prestigious position to be, this is all generated from public donation, like taxpayer money, public funding. Mm-hmm. So I think I would love to see the scientists being aware of it and trying to be more connected back to the society. Like let's come to the science communications part that I'm trying to say is when people are researching, a lot of time you only discuss what you have found after the paper is published. Mm-hmm. And now we started to maybe have one step backward that people are allowed to publish before, like the manuscript, before they are finally accepted. They can have a preprint to be published. But what I like to see is more transparency in the communication of not only success, but also failure, but also process. Like you can see my videos are very process driven, and I am one. I might be too process driven to be a good scientist because I sometimes fail to have a bird's eye view of the problem. Because I'm too hung up by how to get my Excel sheet right, or how I'm too hung up on how to get the technical part right. So, but I, in my recent career, I actually have published in Jove, which is the Journal of Visualized Experiments. Oh. So that was like a protocol that we video recorded all this electron microscope and all these steps that we have to do so intricately in the lab. And they become like a, 5 to 7 minute video that another scientist from another country can see and they can relate to, and they can know exactly how you handle the specimen. Jove has a bad rap because it's not cited enough. Like it has one, I remember it was like a stock market plummeting after I submitted. The impact factor went down from 1.4 to 1.1, and I don't know, even less. And everyone thought I was, in a sense, it could be a way that people would say I'm wasting my time as a young postdoc because it was spending 6 months of my energy writing the screenplay and editing and submitting a video for communicating how we do something. But to me, we can't have a new generation of scientists if we don't properly document how things are done. And PI is so busy, and when you get in the lab and things are not done exactly the way that was supposed to be done, they get angry and there are miscommunication, and students get frustrated because they are not getting the result that they are supposed to have. Mental illness comes in play when, you don't get mental illness when your research work is working, right? So I think what's happening a lot of time is when students are not directed well enough in a transparent way, and they have a lot of vague room of how they should do the research. And if they are not good time manager and they are not good at managing expectation and delivering the result, they get miserable. Time can fly by, and PhD time is, a blink of an eye. You already spent 7 years in the position and you still haven't graduated. And there are people in such a situation just because of poor communication. And that's why I am really passionate about documenting everything I can remember. You are also welcome to send me any clips that you think is important to submit to PhDCoffeeTime with, we can feature your video. But I'm serious about thinking this is a process, dialogue on how do you mount the specimen, on how, how did you analyze those image data? People don't have now we can, the problem is we are not required and nobody has time and space to do it. Absolutely. I'm not sure if this will happen in 5 to 10 years though, because of how academic requirement is only narrower and narrower to metrics, and return on interest is a big expectation behind. If they give you $1 million funding, they wanted 5 papers and they don't care anything else.
What I wanted to piggyback off was exactly what you're saying when it comes to the scientist of the future relying on the, let's say, algorithms of how to do certain things. Because in PhD time, I've also struggled with very poorly written protocols, either in scientific papers or just in the lab notebooks that I had to take a look at. And definitely that's something that's not going to change without really active effort on the part of academics, on the part of just life science community overall. And it seems like this is the biggest gap between, let's say, biological sciences and computer sciences. Because in computer sciences, you could just load an algorithm. That's how I like to think about it. And it would always work on any computer, regardless where it is in the world. But in science, if you do not have a particular algorithm where you define all the variables, you're never going to be able to get the same result, or very unlikely. So coming back all the way to what we started talking about, which is, one of your favorite videos is the lab taking notes. Do you feel like we will eventually get there where the way that we take notes and the way that we design our experiments, as well as share the data in a transparent manner between each other, all the way from conceptualizing idea all the way to the publication, is it going to change in our lifetime? When do you think that shift will actually take place?
So let's come to the concept of how policies got made and how policies could be influenced by stakeholders. Mm-hmm. PhD students who are watching this, you have to realize you are a stakeholder. You are generating this document. You have a say if some rules are going to be changed. And what I love to see is more of us taking a proactive action to document better in the lab. That's the basic that maybe we don't even need a policy change. But another thing you could do is to maybe, if you work in NIH and NSF, if this video reaches a scientific program officer, they could start drafting. There is a requirement for all the funding receiving lab to document properly, and they can send audit. Mm-hmm. Companies got audited all the time. Why doesn't scientific lab get audited? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, do you feel scientists, or let's say PhD students themselves, would welcome that, especially early on, because they're under so much pressure, or it just needs to be really maybe eased into this kind of really stringent environment, and whether or not it actually stifles some kind of creativity and spontaneity of research?
Back in France, actually, my lab did have a systematic audit because of how big our institution is. I actually welcome that because it helps set the expectation on day one. Mm-hmm. What's frustrating about audit is when people are not keeping a good standard and suddenly there is an audit and it become a nightmare. But I think when policy is changing, it's only going to educate people to keep the best practice and keep up with the best practice. And that's part of the training of science anyway, right? That's mm-hmm. the whole reason why you are here as a PhD student. Because if you don't care enough about keeping track of what you do in the lab, then maybe that person shouldn't be in science, right? That is my opinion. I might sound like a harsh professor and like who doesn't get a job as professor, but like I genuinely think it is a part of the training process. If they wanted a job in the industry in the future, they can talk about GMP and they can talk about keeping a good lab notebook, and that make you stand out. And mm-hmm. if you are funded in one of those programs that require good practice of lab keeping, like protocol keeping, and that is going to make you stand out. And I think it's a win-win situation when instruction and expectations are clear, mm-hmm. then everyone benefits from it. And I think a PhD student has the least to say about this because sometimes they are in the situation of not knowing what is expected from them. And I think mm-hmm. that is, to me, not knowing what is expected is much more painful than having a high standard. I'd rather you give me the standard and I follow it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you so much, Vera, for taking the time to speak with me today. It was an amazing experience listening to your tips. I hope more people reach your channel and check it out. I will definitely put it up in the video description below. Thank you very much again, and best of luck with reaching all the metrics that you set your mind to.
Thank you very much. And I would love to have you back on PhD Coffee Time and share a coffee with you. And I'm sure my audience would love to learn more about your platform and all the resources that you put out there.
Thank you very much.